Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gather for Her. I am thrilled to say again that this is season 10 of Gather for Her. Gather for Her is a powerhouse masterclass series exploring what it means to be a relational leader in these unprecedented times of global change. And these conversations are offered to you, our community, to illuminate hope, to encourage possibility, and to challenge you to make the shift from individuated top-down leadership to heart-centered and more relational. My name's Tina Overbury, or Tina O, and I'm your moderator. I'm an ally of settler heritage, and I'm currently living as an uninvited guest on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Skohomish people. I'm grateful to play and create and do my best to steward the land where I rest my head here in Naquelaquam, also known as Bowen Island. And I'm very grateful to be in circle this morning, even though we look like squares. We approach this space as if we're in circle with my co-conversationalists today, Charlene Senchenko, Kelly Beatty, and Sharon Marshall. And we have two other conversationalists on this season, Janet Mohapi Banks and Christina Benti, and of course, with our special guests here today as well, which I will introduce to you in a moment, but Darci and Terry from Wheat. And if you don't know us yet, if you don't know much about Powerhouse, you've just got here. Powerhouse champions relational change makers and their organizations. And we offer hands at your back support as you accelerate the social impact that you're here to make. Our Gather for Her's impact media producer is Regen Media, who invites us to take the power of media into our own hands by supporting stories that heal, regenerate, uplift, and transform. And we're here every 2 weeks on LinkedIn, so you can get your relational leadership plug in. And then we follow up these conversations because they are rich and multi-textured. So we follow this up with an hour-long wisdom circle to unpack with you the concepts that are opened up here. And these circles are held in our community of practice, which is called the Leader Path, and is available to you as a membership fee of $25 per month. But I'll tell you more about that later. Okay, so this conversation is a live conversation, and so we would love it if you would introduce yourself as a listener, a viewer in the chat there. Say hello to us. We want to meet you and meet each other here. And please let us know where you're connecting in from with an acknowledgement of gratitude for the lands in which you rest, play, and grow. And if that's new to you, just know that in this space, this is a very safe relational space, and you can practice here. Maybe it's awkward. You might be saying it weird and not sure if you've got it right, but come as you are here and let's practice and learn together. I want to welcome Kelly Beatty this morning, who's also new to our Gather for Her host circle. And just to let you know, because if you've been watching us for a while, you may not know Kelly, but Kelly is a people-first, heart-centered facilitator, coach, and she integrates people with processes. So I'm going to just hand over and we'll get this conversation started. And maybe Kelly, I'll pass to you first just to introduce yourself, and then feel free to pass to Sharon and Shar, and then I'll introduce Darci and Terry and Wheat.
Sounds great. Thank you. And I am honored to be joining you in circle today from Southeast Saskatchewan, where it's home for me. And I reside on Treaty 4 territory, which is home of the Nehiyawak, the Anishinaabe Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and home of the Métis Nation. And so really excited to be a part of this conversation with my neighbors in Winnipeg today. So with that, I will pass to Sharon.
Thank you, Kelly. And I am excited to be here. My name is Sharon Marshall. I'm one of the Indigenous co-hosts of Gather for Her. I am from Treaty 6 territory, which is, in particular, it's in Edmonton. And I am fortunate to live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Snuneymuxw and the Snuneymuxw First Nations of the Coast Salish people on Vancouver Island. And I'm really thrilled to be here to be in conversation with Wheat. And I'll pass it on to you, Shar.
Thank you. I'm Charlene Senchenko. I'm the founder of Powerhouse and Regen Media. I am a First Nations woman born in Splatcheen in the Shuswap Nation. It is my pleasure to introduce you to a constant and consistent series of conversations with changemakers. And we're listening through these conversations for collective wisdom And I'm really excited to learn more about the change-making work in relational leadership of wheat. So I'd like to pass it back over to Tina to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Shar, and thank you, Darci and Terry, for being with us today in this conversation. So I'm here with Darci Adams, Wheat's founder, and Terry Robertson, the past president of the Ontario Expressive Arts Therapy Association and is the current president of the Canadian Expressive Arts Therapy Association. And it's possible for our listeners to just let you know that Bonfas Betty might also be joining us, who is Wheat's International Expressive Arts Director, but he's having a hard time getting on. He's in Africa right now, but we're holding space for him. So let me tell you about Wheat. Wheat stands for Winnipeg's Holistic Expressive Arts Institute. And the Wheat Institute provides holistic diploma and certificate programs in expressive arts and art therapy. Wheat is the only therapeutic arts training center in central Canada and operates on Treaty 1 territory in Manitoba. Wheat's holistic approach to education incorporates connections with history, nature, culture, and respect for Indigenous ways of knowing into its settings, philosophies, and curriculum. Wheat is the only school of its kind to provide Indigenous language courses within its programs, and it upholds its commitment of excellence in education by working with the most knowledgeable and in-demand educators from across North America. And Powerhouse has the absolute honor of walking beside this organization that is really one of the reasons why, Darci, that we invited you to here to be on Gather is the way that you are embodying allyship and knowing that it's a clunky process and it's a clear decision, but the way it lives in the world can be really challenging in these times where there's so much pain and also so much desire to contribute. And you're walking it in such a beautiful way, totally transparently and kindly. And so we're grateful to be here with you and to learn from you today. I pass to both of you today. Is there anything we missed in your bio that you think I'd like this to be said? Anything there?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting us, Tina. And you have such a caring and forward-thinking organization, so it's really a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Terry, also for being here. I invited Terry as a representative of Expressive Arts in Canada. She's the former president of the Ontario Expressive Arts Therapy Association and the current president of the Canadian Expressive Arts Therapy Association. And because Wheat, that is our intention, is to share the healing power of the arts with people and with diverse people across Canada and internationally. So I thought Terry would be a great voice to be present with us today. So I am Darci Adams. I'm the founder of Wheat Institute, and I am on Treaty 1 territory. So I'm on the eastern shore of Lake Manitoba in Saint Laurent. We're the homeland of the Red River Valley Métis, largest Michif-speaking population. And this is the ancestral lands of the Innu, the Anishinaabe, the Dene, the Dakota, and the Oji-Cree. And I love living here. It's a beautiful space on the lake. And I will just share the lake because I love bringing the lake and the landscape into the conversation. So this is our beautiful Lake Manitoba in its wintry blanket. And so, I invite in the presence of the lake and all our relations here. We have eagles and owls that, come right by the window. And so I love that we're very close to nature. And I guess maybe that would be a place where I would launch in, is just that beauty of connection with nature. That's a very important part of what Wheat offers. And I am here at Painted Sky Studio, which is our most recent addition, I guess, in terms of our location. So we do have a studio where we can offer training on this land, this lake location. So we are on a beach called Laurentia Beach. And it's a beautiful spot, and I do feel deeply connected to the water. One of our programs is called the Rivers of Solidarity, and this is a place we're moving into, is to continually increase our diversity and our ability to reach out to people across diverse geography. And when I first started with my interest in expressive arts, I was 17, and there really weren't any opportunities at that time in Canada to do the training. There was many opportunities in the US, but it was very expensive to go. And so my path has been very much a winding stream or river. And I guess that is why it is so important to me to reach out to people across diverse landscapes to join us in this incredible work. One of my favorite memories of a good day at Wheat was when I had outreach from Bella Coola, the Great Bear Rainforest, from an individual there who was interested in training. And on the same day, someone from Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador reached out. And I just thought, wow, like we've, we've reached out to a broad geographical landscape, which made me feel so happy. The training centers have tended to be in larger urban settings, Vancouver, Toronto, or where this work has been really taken off. And so to be in a small center in Saint Laurent where there's 1,300 people, and to be aware of some of the challenges of accessing training that exists for people in smaller centers, that's really fueled my passion for moving the work forward, and also just expanding the diversity. So we have collaborated with an Indigenous team to launch the first Indigenized expressive arts and art therapy program. And that grew out of um, the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association conference, which I had been asked to co-chair that with IATA, the International Association. And I felt the theme of Indigenous roots of expressive arts was really what needed to be brought forth in Winnipeg, Manitoba at that time. So we had an international group of folks, about 300 people came to Winnipeg, and that's where I met Dr. Fiery Jean Graveline, with whom we collaborated to launch that first Indigenized program. And that team has gone on to create their own school, the Life as Medicine Art Therapy School. And so I think, and all of this happened very quickly. The conference was in 2017. We gathered with a grandmother's circle, including Dr. Fiery Jean Graveline and other Indigenous grandmothers. We gathered on the banks of the South Saskatchewan at Ancient Spirals Retreat Center and really laid the groundwork for that programming with the Indigenous team, which developed as we moved along. And now there's an Indigenous art therapy school. So it's just, I come back to that metaphor of the river, that this work can move quickly when we're willing to step into it and just step into the power of the river and allow the greater forces of change to move us. And I have an openness to change. I think that's part of what I bring, is just a readiness to embrace change. As a child, we moved pretty well every year that I was in grade school, and that was just a skill that I developed, that change happens and I can't resist it, so I'm going to flow with it. And so I'm going to just stay with that river metaphor of rivers of change, rivers of solidarity, and not being afraid to step into the river wherever you may find yourself in it at any given moment. So maybe I'll pass it to Terry in terms of the broader context of expressive arts therapy in Canada, and maybe a little bit of the history or the context of where we've come from in terms of the development of the field.
Well, let's see. We started becoming aware of regulation back in 2007 with this in Ontario. There's I should say that I am in the territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Mississaugas of the Credit, and a lot of Anishinaabe and Cree and Ojibwe, Oji-Cree speaking peoples too. I'm in the catchment of the two-row wampum from 1612, where we're to live our lives parallel in peace and harmony and not cross each other. So we've got a lot of reparation to make there in terms of being settler here in this land. Just to acknowledge all these animal, plant, and element relatives as well. So then we have the crown and the regulatory bodies that are sweeping the land. So we had to prepare, we had to figure out how are we going to fit in, because we learned that unless you had a professional association representing you, you're not likely to be recognized. So we launched the Ontario Expressive Arts Therapy Association back in 2009, I guess, as soon as I graduated from school. And started meeting. And today we've got about 250 members. And we realize we still don't have a national voice. And people out in BC are saying, hey, why are we part of an OEADA Ontario-based thing? That doesn't seem right. So we've got ourselves some representation on some of the association of association level boards. Like they have, they're called FACT, the Federation of Associations of Counseling Therapists, outside of Ontario, where we have a different thing called Partnership of Registered Psychotherapist Associations. So we have members who are sitting on those various at the table so that we can have a voice across Canada. I guess the intention is hopefully we will have more provincial associations, as all ministries of health are provincial. So that's the wish. So far, we've got about 50 members out in BC, and we've got a dozen or so in Winnipeg. So we're growing, and we'll see where this can go. We're trying to build relationships with the regulatory colleges. For instance, I sit as co-chair of the PRPA here, and have a relationship with the registrar at the college. We meet 3-4 times a year just to discuss what can the associations do to help members have professional, ethical practices. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Darci, you're going to pick up on something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we do have wheat grads sitting on those associations now. So Miriam Duff is our FACT representative in expressive arts in the Manitoba FACT, which is in its development, and we're close to the legislation of counseling in Manitoba. So such a valuable thing is that expressive arts is at the table with other counseling associations. So whether there are so many different types of counseling, and expressive arts is relatively new. So when I started WHEAT, I believe we had one registered expressive arts therapist in Manitoba. So that's how new this work really is. Art therapy has been around for longer, so we have more representatives in art therapy. But we have Miriam with the FACT Manitoba, and then also Frida Lepp-Kadler, who is an instructor at Providence College. So she did her thesis work on expressive arts therapy and language learning. And so she is now the Canadian regional representative for the International Expressive Art Therapy Association. So I want to create this understanding that this is new landscape, it's new territory in terms of bringing expressive arts into the conversation. And I think the diversity is our strength. In terms of resilience and leadership, diversity is our strength. I started as a public school teacher and a guidance counselor. And in the public school that I worked at, we had 46 different language of origin represented in that school. And that is not uncommon in Canadian schools, that you would have that breadth and that diversity of people, in the conversation. And so we have invited Bonfast Betty, who is in Nairobi, Kenya. He's doing a PhD in peace and conflict resolution studies at the University of Manitoba. And we've invited him in to join us at this leg of our journey to really, walk that talk of bringing diversity in, and not just within Canada, but internationally as well. And as well, we have invited Lindsay Ashmore, who is a therapist in Edmonton, Alberta. She's Cree Métis, and she's also going to be our Indigenous outreach person. So we're trying to understand what the healing power of expressive arts is from different cultural perspectives, because using art as a healing tool is ancient. It's original. Original peoples used art as a way of understanding and relating and celebrating with their environment and their communities. And there's so much wisdom in that. And there's also the I guess what we refer to as Western clinical expressive art therapy, which initiated in the US. Sean McNiff and Paulo Knill were working at Lesley University and brought together some principles of expressive arts, which Steve and Ellen Levine expanded upon through their work and took to the Create Institute in Toronto, which was the first expressive arts institute in Canada. So this is all very good stuff that, we're expanding across Canada. There's schools in Vancouver, schools in Alberta, and I feel very excited and honored and also challenged to find ways to bring this work forward in Manitoba and to collaborate with Indigenous peoples to do the work in respectful ways and to ensure that voices are heard and that the field is listening to everyone's voices.
Beautiful. We just finished a conversation with Brenda Morrison, speaking about restorative justice, and the way she opened that conversation was the importance. It was around the question of purpose, and what she brought to the table really dovetails beautifully with what you're saying. And what she was offering is that in relationship, stories aren't facts. Stories are all the things around the facts. It's context, it's layers, and of course, art is a language of that. I'm wondering if there's, because you've done such a great job of setting the table for someone listening who may not understand expressive arts. Is there anything you can offer us around like a story of what expressive arts actually looks like, so we can live it a little bit? And it's kind of, it's connected to the purpose question, like why expressive arts? How can you let us in a little bit on why expressive arts in any way you want to help us get there?
I mean, I could just briefly step in with the fact that expressive arts is intermodal. So it includes all of the arts. So whether it's movement or poetry or drama, it's all forms of self-expression. And we bring in the land as a component of that, and having experiences on the land. So when I started my therapy practice, I was working at the St. Norbert Arts Center, which is a space that was a monastery for Trappist monks. But prior to that, it was an Indigenous gathering site and ceremonial site. So there are still active sweat lodges there. There's a sweat lodge carrier that works those lodges. And actually, a Buddhist monk in Vietnam had tuned into this aliveness and sort of spiritual possibility in 3 centers in the world. And that site was actually one of the centers that was chosen as a Buddhist site. So a stupa was built there. So for me, what healing and walking with clients looked like was being in the meadow by the river of by the La Salle River, painting on the riverbank, and tuning in to the arrival of animals, such as witnessing 4 bald eagles spiraling overhead during a painting experience. And sometimes it involved, running and climbing up the the shorter walls of the monastery ruins, which are about 6 feet tall. And, children love to just have that experience of using their bodies in a positive and strong way. And so to me, expressive arts uses all of your parts. It brings in your spirit, it brings in your body, it brings in your emotions and your intellect. And that is really what creative process is. It's allowing a relationship with your imagination. So you're painting something, you're dialoguing with what you've painted, you're listening to your creation. And if that's movement, it's like, what is that expression telling me? What is it calling forth in me? And to me, that is resilience, is having many different avenues for personal expression, including movement, poetry, all forms of expression leads to wellness. And having that connection with nature as part of it, and really listening to nature, is health and wellness, and not forgetting the body. So expressive arts is very embodied, and it allows us to tune into that wisdom of the body. So those are just some of the things that come to my mind. Terry, do you want to share?
I'm just thinking here, like I've got these things. I live quite close to a Leslie Spit, and I like, it's a place made out of rubble. So this is like old bits of pieces, so of buildings in Toronto, and I go down there with clients either by bike or we walk down there and just feel more of our inner power through more right brain activity. I guess kind of decentering out of the cognitive list making stuff and into our bodies, and even bridging into like the invisibles, the unknown, the ancestors, whoever came before us, however we got here, and like just showing some appreciation for that and connecting through the elements of what is around us. And I have to say, we have had little mink relatives run across right in front of us, or snakes, or different little creatures. We've had fisher cat. There's coyotes down, lots of different creatures down there. So this is an opportunity, especially in the pandemic. People were fried just being inside all the time, and they just wanted to be in person, even if it was outside. So this kind of was a perfect moment to engage, and we would move from poetry to maybe sounding to the lake. It's Lake Ontario here, or bridge, or like circling back and creating an installation out of whatever we find there. Just using our bodies to create something together. So in a way, I guess it undoes aloneness, and it certainly served that purpose during the pandemic, and has a healing impact, right? By just feeling ourselves physically, and in the arts, kind of brings you back into your own authenticity. I guess I would have to say that's right. Like that's kind of how it goes, right, Darci?
Yeah, yeah.
Who's going to pass Kelly, if that's okay? I think she's got a question, if that's all right. Yeah.
No, I can really appreciate, and I was thinking that, over the last couple of years, I think what's been exciting to see in times of pandemic is that people have become a lot more relational to the land and to, a natural way of being. And we've seen more holistic approaches to, just growing gardens and getting back to some of that traditional way for many different purposes. And it's really exciting to see. But as I listened to both of you speak, one of the things that really came to me was a lot of times we talk about relational leadership, and it's in the context of others. And listening to the two of you, it really took me to the relational leadership in the context of self, which is really often one of the most vital steps in then creating relationship with others. and being able to build context in, you know, that that back and forth exchange, that connection, um, and building a vulnerability and authenticity with others starts with self. And so that perspective of the art and your holistic view, and I can almost see where you're sitting right now and the pictures you both painted about where you take your clients and how that therapy works to build self in a holistic form and the transformation that can occur. You know, what is, I guess, coming into that, what are some of the greatest transformations you see in terms of perhaps that relational leadership with self in those you work with in this program?
Hmm. Well, another example that came to my mind was my supervisor, who was not an expressive arts therapist, but Margaret Tobin, and she's since passed of cancer, but she was an amazing leader. And she started a choir for people who were told they couldn't sing. And so we started around her dining room table, about 7 of us, singing Christmas carols, I believe is where we first started. But that choir grew to be 150 people strong. And it was all people who at some point were basically denied their voice. And it was such a beautiful celebration of people. And so at a time when expressive arts didn't really exist within our community in the sense of that, title expressive arts, I feel like she was doing that and she was a leader in that. And the way people felt through sharing song in community was so empowering and, embraced diversity. And another example would be Indigenous cultural teacher and artist Val Vint and I had launched Indigenous drumming circles in the elementary schools that I worked in. So I always brought Val in and we would have these drumming circles. We did them at the lunch hour. And, on one occasion we had 50 students crammed into the library, all with drums. And they had actually painted these drums with their own animal symbols that they'd selected. And again, the celebration of diversity in that room and that connecting with the heartbeat of Mother Earth, and every child, regardless of ability, whoever they were, they tuned into the drum and just loved it. And the looks on their faces, their smiles, and the amount of noise we made in the school, which they all, kids love making noise at school. And so just it is a celebration of voice and giving people tools to express themselves in ways that they haven't maybe seen as possible. Another thing that sometimes happens in expressive arts is people feel like, wow, like I can't even believe I made that. Like I am not an artist. It's, or I'm not a singer. I can't believe I sang that. And so just that opening the door to someone's imagination, creativity, self-expression feels rejuvenating. It feels empowering, surprising, and hopeful. It's like there's hope in those individual expressions that can come as part of community. Terry, do you want to add?
Sure. So I thought of a couple of examples, and one is I've worked for since 2006, I guess, with homeless people at a shelter downtown. We have an expressive arts therapy program at Margaret's, and it didn't seem to be enough to have the amount of time we had. So we started this mindful walking film collective. So anybody could join us and we would just go for a walk after our regular hours. And we ended up walking to a garden allotment and we managed to get in. Somebody let us in and we walked through there and everybody was so amazed. Like some of these people are still living in Allen Gardens in tents. So like people don't have housing. A few did, but not all. And everyone thought it was kind of magical in there and said, wow, what would it be like if we could have a garden here? So I ended up getting one of the garden allotments, and we started this program where everybody seeded their tomatoes and their cucumbers, bits of sandwiches from the drop-in kitchens. And we ended up with some plants. And so that was the first crop. And then we took the like tomatoes and stuff, squashes down to the kitchen to be used. And we started making movies, animated films. So the first one we made was on wishes, needs, and wants for housing. And that was really interesting. That was 15 minutes. That was through the Toronto Animated Image Society, came and helped us with that. And then we made a second one on where do we go from here to be rid of gun violence, because there was a big problem here in Toronto. And that ended up in being screened at the TO Cares, Toronto Cares municipal, I guess it was a kind of conference on gun violence. So it aired there. And the other one ended up in the Canadian Homeless Film Festival out in Hamilton. So we the collective made the trip for the for the premiere, and it was like huge excitement. So even though people don't have a house and a home, our collective is a home. So it's a mobile collective, and that really rang true for a lot of people. And even in the pandemic, as they've shut down the programming, I'm still in contact with the core group, and we're still doing things together. In fact, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a drum somewhere over. Anyway, there's a drum, and that just arrived a couple of weeks ago because someone brought it. So yeah, pretty interesting.
It's like the call of expression was the core of the community gathering. It was, and then that community gathering created a thing, a product, if you will, or there was it created something, but it was the core of the expression that brought everybody together. I just want to toss to you, Sharon, if there's anything present for you, bubbling up for you as a creative yourself, and just not that there needs to be, just checking in.
Well, there's a few things. What came to mind right at this moment, though, is that everybody needs to feel like they belong somewhere. And, as you were telling me the story about the homeless people, Terry, I thought about the last conversation that we had with our friend Brenda, and how everybody needs to feel like they belong, and they need a place to call home, even if they are homeless. So that's what came to my mind when you said that. And then, I'm curious if either of you have read the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
No.
She talks about creativity and the magic of creativity. And so that is very present in the work that you're doing. And I'm just, there's a couple things, and I'm curious about, you talked about, Darci, wanting to bring your programs to more people. You're challenged with bringing your programs, the awareness of it to more people. Do you do any online work?
Yeah, we have started, because of the pandemic, everything went online. So our whole program went online. And I would say that did automatically increase the diversity of our students, and also our collaboration with our Indigenous team, of course, increased our diversity. And Dr. Fiery Jean Graveline was really focused on creating safe space for Indigenous students. So in our first cohort, we had 8 of 9 students who were Indigenous and 1 ally, because we really wanted to keep that balance of the voice and worldview with the Indigenous students and teachers. All of their teachers were Indigenous. So I think that helped to reach out further into smaller communities, Indigenous communities, and that is part of what we're doing right now in terms of our current diversification. And the Rivers of Solidarity is a program that just launched this year. And again, we're looking at communities that may not have felt included in former expressive arts schools. And so how do we see who's missing from the conversation and then reach out, partly by having faculty and leadership from different communities that are underrepresented in our field. So that has been a really important step for us
Mhm.
in terms of reaching more broadly, in addition to being online. And we have a land-based location, which I'm so passionate about, that land-based and in-person work. I'm hoping that we can still kind of reignite that willingness to be in person, because I think kind of turned a corner where people now actually sometimes prefer to do the online meeting. But definitely in our field, there's something magical about being present with the tactile experience of art making and moving and connecting in person. So I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I teach digital literacy and virtual administrative skills to Indigenous women, and it's a completely online program. Um, However, there are some in-person activities that take place twice within the 20 weeks. But it's a great way to reach the smaller communities, the communities that don't have access to these programs, because if you got enough people involved from one location, you could create it like a satellite an office or some place. You just need to know that you've got interest, right? Because I think that I think it's so important. Like with my program, the second module of my course, I had the girls, the ladies, all read Big Magic in a week, and some of them have never read a book, and certainly not in a week, and it challenged them. But throughout the program, at the end, that's one of their favorite modules because of the creative. They go, they they can cite all the quote Elizabeth Gilbert on many of the phrases that she has, talked about, the creative spirit and whatnot. And so creativity, like it was almost like a craving for them.
Yeah.
And so
Are you trying to? I'm not trying to. Are you speaking to what I'm reading between the lines here is because so much of your expertise is in these remote areas, in communities where Indigenous people don't necessarily have access to all these other things. And am I hearing you say that creativity and expression is a need in these areas? And
I think so, exactly. Like because that I felt there was a craving for it. Because initially they were like, oh, I'm not going to, but once they got into it and started reading the stories, and I'm sure it was very relatable. They all had relatable stories, and I really do feel that there's a need, there's a craving for it, a creative expression.
Mm-hmm. We did do an outreach in Sioux Lookout. So we did actually take our teachers and our whole program there and offered an expressive arts certificate in Sioux Lookout. So that is one, chance we had to actually take our programming further afield, and we're very open to that. So if a community reached out to us with that request or that craving, we would definitely honor that. We have a student working in a remote location right now on practicum in a fly-in location. And so it's starting to expand, can feel that starting to expand. And I think you're also touching on this meeting place of traditional Indigenous creativity and art making and the field of expressive arts. And I know there's kind of a bridge there and rich learning in terms of understanding the role of art in Indigenous communities, in terms of ceremony and and practical matters of, clothing and, that all things were made by hand. And so there's a really beautiful bridge there between expressive arts and traditional Indigenous art making that I think is being explored more fully, and will continue to be explored more fully through Life as Medicine, the Indigenous Art Therapy School, and also the work that we're doing in collaboration with our Indigenous faculty.
Well, and the technology, right? Like you have to bring in the technology so for example, I hosted a drum making workshop during the pandemic. It was when the pandemic first started. So we had 6 of us in my home, and the Indigenous facilitator was in her home in another city, and we did it via Zoom. And so using the technology, but doing something very traditional, and it was incredible.
I'm going to pass to you, Shar, if that's all right, because I haven't heard any. We haven't you always drop this big awesome thing and on the table, and I'm just wondering, are you holding back or?
No, I'm just holding space. Not holding back. I'm holding space. I think what comes up for me is a comment and a question. My comment is embodying a creative process absolutely unlocks possibility. And, the story about homeless folks in a garden, and then starting their own garden, it is just, the epitome of that. And, it is definitely a vision that Sharon and I share, in that bringing more opportunities in media, film, and creativity to Indigenous women wherever they're at, because of where we're at in history. My teacher says, we're at the end of a very dark chapter. So of course there is craving, and whatever processes and practices we can participate in to unlock hope and possibility are absolutely what is needed now. And that's why I'm a fan, a new fan, albeit, but I'm a fan of wheat. My question is, knowing that you would like to grow more partnerships and more participation across Turtle Island, how would someone listening and watching know that they're a good fit for you? What would their craving be, whether they be a community, an organization, an individual? How would they recognize that they might be a good partner or participant with wheat? I'd like to go from the audience point of view for a second.
Yeah. I think just feeling that resonance with the idea of creative self-expression and maybe their own personal experiences where they've had the opportunity to express themselves, whether it be in a choir or, in a more formal art experience of painting, but just, as Sharon describes it, that craving for creative self-expression and the desire for healing, the awareness that maybe that creative self-expression can bring healing and a sense of wellness, even if it's dancing at a social event and just you go home and you feel great and that was so fun, and just so that, physical expression, just that sense of the potential that art as healing can bring, and wanting that. I love the word crave. I really appreciate that, because it's a good thing, because we don't have enough opportunities for creative self-expression. And traditionally in school, creative self-expression was judged. It was assessed in the art class where you were, often copying something that you were supposed to perfect, or in choir where maybe you were told you couldn't sing and you had to stand in the back row or just mouth the words, and this is really contrary to that. It's just opening up those doors of creative expression for everyone, and valuing and just loving what's generated, the possibilities generated through creative self-expression. So I think reach out to us, info@weedinstitute.com. We love to hear from people and are very excited, as I mentioned, when communities we haven't heard from before arrive in our inbox or on the phone. We're thrilled with that. And it just goes back to that kind of longing that I had as a 17-year-old of, I went to San Francisco and it was like, how can I be a part of this? And, I practically would have had to sell my mom's house to, to join in on that experience. And so that is what we want to do differently. We want this to be accessible and, want people to feel the great power and fun and joy and hope that's possible through creative expression.
I think that's amazing. And if I can, in some of the work that I do, I incorporate play into leadership development and team building and change. And what I find is when we create, and the research shows us that when we create a hand body, if you will, or a hand brain body brain connection, we increase that activity 70 to 80% of where our mind goes in our creative expression through that, and we can adapt better. And what it does is it gets us into a state of flow. And you've touched on flow in terms of your introduction and showing us the lake nearby, and you've talked about how you have flown like a river and how this allows us to. And I think it's really important in the work that you're doing that you're bringing back that play, if you will, where, we do it as children, we do it in grade school, in terms of our learning, and then we do it again in that last phase of life in retirement, but we fail to do it in the years we spend the majority of our time. So I think the work that you're doing, again, is so important in bringing that to individuals through therapy and allowing them to be creative and to build relation with self. That I can't imagine the impact and the ripple effect of what that does in the rest of their lives.
I like the expression bees buzzing, because when people are creating together, it's just like this, like
Yeah.
there's just so much happening, and that the individual expression connects to collective expression. And that is a great thing as well. Just that sense of being part of something bigger through creative experience.
We can all use some returning to our own humanity through the arts. I mean, that's the metaphor that we speak to the soul world with, is our arts. So it's kind of a way to reconnect with our own authenticity. So you always feel more yourself when you're doing the arts, and if it's together with a bunch of people, it just gets amplified.
Beautiful. Oh, go ahead.
So, I was just going to say it's so interesting because I hear you both speak, and Darci, I really resonate when you say, pardon the paraphrase, but when you say, when we're fully into our own creative expression, we then can connect into the collective expression. As a creative entrepreneur and social impact, that's absolutely the intention of Powerhouse. It's absolutely. I just happen to be a very creative entrepreneur, but the bees buzzing, yeah, for sure. I love it. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to pick up on that as we actually move into our last round. We did have two other questions, but you've actually answered them. They weren't just kind of on point. Like the second question was really about relational leadership tips, and Darci, earlier on, you had mentioned just about the importance of like the recognition of there was 46 different languages in the school that you were in, and I was like, wow, that's a relational leadership tip right there. That remembering of diversity, and then you also mentioned about accessibility, making sure, like there was the story of, what, am I going to have to sell my mother's house to get here? So being in relationship is also about accessibility. And then Terry, your story of going from the, of the garden, and like, let expression lead, let that expression lead. So I just want to bring some focus to that. I'm not trying to answer for you, but I actually just want to say that you've actually done a great job of answering them without them being, the questions being asked. And the last part of it was to speak about resilience. And I think the answer that came forth in this space was craving, was like fulfilling craving, with expression. I'm going to pass back to both of you, though, in case I missed something and there was something you really wanted to say about relational leadership and resilience, and then we'll close together.
Yeah, what comes to my mind is something that's true of the arts, which is trust the process. And I would like to express the challenges of change, and the deep challenges of change that, really challenge us personally, in terms of, we have our best intentions, and how are we supporting positive change, positive social change. And part of it for me has been to keep my eye on the long-term goal. Like, what is the long-term goal? And really the day-to-day turbulence, if I could use that word, is a part of the long-term goal. And I think that has been a really important understanding and deep kind of lived experience, that we do need to stay in relationship through the turbulence and trust the long-term goal. And I kind of get goosebumps around that, because I just feel that is true. That really resonates as true to me, and also difficult. And I think, some of my experience as a child prepared me to maybe hold space for what people might experience as chaos, or might feel frustrated by, because the change feels so disruptive. And for whatever reason, maybe because I lived with some of that, that I feel okay with that. And I kind of I have a vision of what is possible through the arts in our communities. And my heart does not lose touch with that vision, despite the turbulence. And I really hope that for other people, where if they're feeling turbulence, that they can stay connected to their vision and bring in those wellness experiences of self-expression, the arts, connecting with nature, finding safe spaces to tell your story. And this is one of them. And I really want to just thank you, as part of our closing, for helping me to believe that, that I have a space for my story. And I really appreciate the ways that you hold space for diverse stories. So thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Terry?
Wow, I'm just so appreciative that we have the arts. And that we've been invited here by this incredibly strong group of feminists. I didn't know about your group, and now I am getting a sense of what you're about. And that is something that I can bring back to the board at OIATA. So hopefully we can have a link to whatever this leads to.
Yes, this is where we're in relationship already, right? This is how it happens, is in conversation. And so with that, I'm going to pass back to us here, and with I think we're going to let you guys have the last word, but a 2-word checkout maybe from the 4 of us, and then we'll let you 2 check out, and we'll close our circle. For me, it is I'm leaving with turbulence and beauty. I'll pass to you, Kelly.
I am leaving with tuning in and flow. Sharon.
Turbulence, it's more than 2 words. Turbulence is the journey. Sure.
Mine's a sentence, and I just wrote it in the chat here as well. But generational change. Always remembering we're all in this for the long game, and swimming in the river. Back to your analogy, Darci, just under the turbulence. I wear a seahorse around my neck to remind me that I swim just under the turbulence for generational change.
And Darci and Terry, how about you? What do you want to check out with? And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm going to close with gratitude and just bring my mom back into the conversation, who is a 83-year-old feminist who kept her eye on the vision and helped me believe that anything is possible. Thank you all so much. Chimigwech kinenaskamit nawaw.
And I would have to say some serious play and send it up to the grandmothers and the mothers.
Let's close on serious play.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for being here. All of our listeners, you can tune in to this you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Spotify, and you can join us on the Leader Path to unpack it all together. And hands up to you, Darci and Terry and Wheat Institute, for all you do and all you are. And may this story ripple out to everyone and affect beautiful change. We'll see you all again. Bye, everybody.